Good evening. We'll go ahead and have everyone find a seat and we'll start our event this evening. Welcome. My name is Cecilia Kuntz. I go by Cease and I am the mayor of Monmouth. And I'm happy to be your host tonight for our first inaugural event. I'll give you a couple of historical tidbits. I am the first elected female mayor of Monmouth. And another first, I was on the inaugural Board of Trustees of Western Oregon University as it became an independent public institution in 2015. My other first is that I was the chief petitioner on the ballot measure to allow hard liquor in Monmouth. So when you have a martini in Monmouth since 2009, you can either thank me or blame me. You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. I am very excited to welcome you to the very first annual History and Mystery Monmouth event. It is sponsored by our own Historic Commission in Monmouth, which is a group of volunteers, and I'd like to introduce some of them are here tonight. Our staff person for this is our Community Development Director, Suzanne Duffner, and she's here with us this evening. Our commission members are George Jeffrey, Lori Albert, James Masnoff, Bob Edgar, Nita Wilson, James Mannion, and Bethany Dykstra. And our program this evening was researched and written by Natalie Dean and Marilyn Morton and was created by Emily McNulty and Amy Christensen. And you'll meet some of them here tonight, but we want to thank them for this first event. The reason we're doing this, we want to get people excited about the rich history we have in Monmouth and share some very fun stories. Keeping with the season, there might be a slightly paranormal focus to some of them, and we'll introduce that to you tonight. We also, we have 3 storytellers from our community, but we also have 3 organizations here tonight to share a bit about what they do to keep local history alive. The Polk County Historical Museum here is with us. They are in a building up in Rick Rial, and hopefully you've had a chance to visit with them, but they have a booth over here and they can tell you a lot about what they do. We also have the Heritage Museum of Independence, hopefully soon to move to a new fully accessible location in Independence, and we wish them well in that. And then also the Western Oregon University Library and Archives. As you'll hear, that's very much an important part of the history of Monmouth, and they have a lot of our historical artifacts there at the University Library. So we invite you to visit with those representatives tonight, and we ask you to add to the lore. If you have a story of your own about either the history of Monmouth or maybe something you've experienced a little unusual, we have a table right here where you can write down your tale, and you never know, it might be incorporated into our event next year. So I'd like to welcome you again, and I'm going to take you back to the beginnings of Monmouth. The first pioneer settlers came to Monmouth from Monmouth, Illinois. They came in 3 separate wagon trains between about 1850 and 1853, and it was known as the Monmouth Migration. Most of the early pioneers were related by blood or marriage, and hopefully not both. And they were members of the Disciples of Christ Church. They were attracted by the passage of the Oregon Donation Land Act. And in that act, there was a prospect of getting 640 acres of free land to any married couple that settled here. My husband is a real estate broker, and he will tell you 640 acres would be worth a lot of money today. So these people came to Monmouth to fulfill their dream to establish an institution where men and women alike might be schooled in the science of living and with the fundamental principles of religion. Family traditions from people in our community recount that the women pioneers agreed to go on this 2,000-mile trek west only under the condition that a school be formed as a condition of the move. So, Monmouth University was formed. It's been through many name changes, now Western Oregon University, and it was officially opened in 1856. The cost of tuition that year would set students back $5 if they were studying the English branches, and the higher branches of education, philosophy and things like that, would cost a whole $7. And if they studied geometry, trigonometry, Greek, or Latin, they might spend $9 for their education. So those students would graduate with a bachelor's degree. And they could obtain a master's degree within 1 year if they paid $10 to the library fund and were deemed competent and worthy of such a distinction. In 1859, there were 21 families in Monmouth. The bustling downtown included 3 dry goods stores, 1 grocery store, 1 drugstore, 1 saddle and harness shop, 2 blacksmith shops, and 2 wagon makers, and 1 cooper shop. The coopers were those who made the barrels and casks and butter churns, and there was a post office in 1859. Fire destroyed almost the entire business section of town in 1879, which was then located on Monmouth Avenue. So our north-south street was the main business district, and the businesses began rebuilding here on Main Street after that fire. Unfortunately, they didn't quite learn from that. It took a few more fires before the first fire department was formed, and the Monmouth Hook and Ladder Company number 1 was in business. The business owners decided to rebuild using brick, as we see today on some of our beautiful historic buildings here on Main Street. One of the early disputes of the town settlers needed to be resolved was the name of the town. There were 5 trustees who supervised the layout of the town, and they met and could not agree on a name. 2 of them wanted to call the town Dover, and that's perhaps after Dover, Delaware, but we don't really know. The reason for that has been lost and remains one of our mysteries. The other 2 wanted to name the town Monmouth after the home in Illinois that most of them had left to come here. The name Monmouth followed one of the early pioneer families, the Butlers, whose ancestors came from Monmouth, a city on the west coast of England near its border with Wales. So, with a 2-2 tie, Ira Butler, Monmouth's first mayor, broke the tie and voted for Monmouth. So there's now a mural on the south wall of our volunteer hall across the street behind City Hall. That mural was commissioned in 2010, and it depicts the Monmouths from England to Illinois to Oregon. So a beautiful mural if you ever want to see a little bit of our history there. When the city of Monmouth, still populated, remember, by the church members, was chartered and set up self-governance, you probably won't be surprised to hear that its first laws and ordinances were to, number 1, prohibit the sale of intoxicating liquors in the town of Monmouth. Section 1 of the ordinance stated, no person shall sell, give away, or cause to be sold or given away, or cause to be publicly used any intoxicating liquor within the corporate limits of the town of Monmouth, except he be licensed as a druggist by the Common Council, and then only on the written prescription of a regular practicing physician signed by him as such, which prescription shall not be duplicated. So now you understand why often a drink is called grandma's medicine. So what was the penalty for anyone caught violating that ordinance? A fine of not less than $10 and not more than $50 for each offense. Quite a steep fine. And if you couldn't pay the fine, your property could be seized and sold. So what if you didn't have any property? You could be committed to the county jail at the discretion of the city recorder, or work off the fine for the city for $2 per day. So remember that. Ordinance number 2 created a list of public offenses and provided for confinement to the county jail for those who violated it. This ordinance prohibited any brawl or tumult, or rude or indecently or disorderly conduct, gambling with cards or gambling devices, as well as driving any animal or team of animals upon any sidewalk in the town of Monmouth. Ordinance number 2 also established the city's first speed limit. And just so you know, any person who shall ride or drive any horse or horses, mule or mules, or any beast of burden within the corporate limits of the town of Monmouth at a greater speed than 6 miles per hour shall, upon conviction before the recorder, be fined in any sum not exceeding $100. Right? So speeding, worse than drinking. I don't know about drinking and speeding. And a possible prison term of 20 days confinement. A number of the early ordinances also dealt with livestock roaming freely or staked for grazing purposes in the streets. And here it is important to note, in an historical context, that there were no specific mentions of either backyard chickens nor of the city's responsibility for wild peahens and peacocks. As the town continued to grow, Monmouth University became a state normal school, which at the time was responsible for the education and training of teachers, an important role that continues today and makes Western Oregon University the oldest public university in the state. In the late 1800s, we had not just one, but actually 2 railroads that came to Monmouth. The Oregonian Railroad was built connecting Monmouth to Dallas and to the town of Airlie, south of town. This railroad ran down Warren Street, so the street right along here on this edge of the park, and that is where we actually had an old train depot. The Independence and Monmouth Railway was also built around this time to connect the cities of Monmouth and Independence. The railway was claimed to be the shortest independent railway in the world at 2.5 miles each way. So the I&M Railroad ran down Jackson Street, just behind the amphitheater here, and you can still see one of the steps to get off of the rail cars in the block right across Knox Street. So please visit the tables tonight. You will see a plaque that will be mounted later this year. It will commemorate the beginning spot of the historic transportation system. So you'll all be a little bit more aware of the I&M Railroad. And another popular destination in our community, if you didn't take the railway, was the town of Talmadge. There was an actual town located in the S-curves, and Talmadge was the site of many town rivalry baseball games and also some horse races. Might have been a little betting on the side there too, is my guess. So these that I've told you are just a few snippets of Monmouth history, taken mostly from a book by a gentleman named Scott MacArthur. It's called The Saga of a Small American Town, and we are really gifted to have such a wonderful historian and writer in our community. Scott MacArthur is also known for instigating another bit of Monmouth history. He was part of the group that put in an official proposal for our community to host the Winter Olympics. Yes, they had many events planned for that, one of which is actually what has led to our modern day mini marathon on our 4th of July parade. There's a lot of great tales in that book and from Scott MacArthur. But tonight we're going to hear from several other storytellers. They will share some of the lesser known stories about our history and maybe a few about some allegedly haunted buildings here in town. So we hope you enjoy this event. Take advantage of the opportunity to learn more about our area and some of the great resources available over here with our historical organizations. The first of these I want you to hear from is the Polk County Historical Society, and I'm pleased to welcome Ann Gage to the stage, and we'll tell you a little bit about what they do, and we'll get on with the night. Thank you for being here.
It's cold, isn't it? Like she said, I'm Ann Gage. I'm from a ghost town myself called Ballston, which is in the extreme north county of Polk. And there's nothing scary about it at all. Well, sometimes the big trucks. Anyway, Polk County Historical Society was founded 60 years ago, so this is our 60th birthday. And it's also the 20th birthday of our museum in Rickreall. Polk County Historical Society actually has two museums. The one in Rickreall, which is more traditional and includes a library, and also a video library, and we have some of Scott MacArthur's books there. The other museum we maintain is out on Highway 22, and it's called Brunk Farmstead. And it's a pioneer farmstead that has dwindled from 1,100 acres down to 1. But on site is the Brunk House, which is, as far as we know, the only remaining structure from the old city of Eola. What is happening in that facility is we're trying to turn it into a hands-on learning center for everyone. And our most recent happy addition is a fully functioning blacksmith shop. So we'll be offering classes and demonstrations there and other hands-on learning activities within the other buildings. So we invite you to our birthday party that's happening October 19th out at the museum at the fairgrounds. And we're having cake and balloons, and the Guthrie Park musicians will be playing. That starts at 1:30 on October 19th, so please come. And I would like to introduce at this time Councilman Christopher Lopez. You here? Oh.
Now, Monmouth may be a small town, yet mayhem has found a way to roam these otherwise quiet streets nonetheless. How do I know this, you may ask? Well, it is my job to know those things which others do not. Few know the higher criminal world of Monmouth so well as I do. Let us begin with the disappearance at River Bridge. In November of 1904, on a frigid but clear night in the Polk County Bank, was invaded by 3 burglars who pried open a window. Nitroglycerin was then used to set off 4 explosions, blowing off the doors to the bank. Upon cracking the doors to the walk-in safe, they encountered another small safe nestled within. These explosives being spent, the money safe inside was left untouched and undamaged. Unable to access this safe, which held gold and other valuable currency, they instead settled for several $100s in silver. All this commotion did not go unnoticed. Residents a full block away from the crime later said they heard the explosion. However, an official report of the theft wasn't given until 7:30 that following morning. By this time, the burglars were long gone, having stolen a wagon and horses from the nearby grocers to aid in their escape. The thieves left Monmouth and headed to the west end of the Willamette River Bridge, where the horses were then tied up and abandoned. On the night of their getaway, telephone operators in downtown Independence recall the distinct noise of horse-drawn wagon moving down Main Street at around 3 a.m. From there, they were believed to have crossed the bridge to Salem, but vanished without a trace, not to be seen in these parts again. Unfortunately, the thieves were not apprehended, and the stolen silver never recovered. The entire affair, noisy as it was, remains a mystery. Now, I wish I could tell you that this is where the caper ends. But in 1908, a similar crime occurred, this time with a new target and less fortunate perpetrators. This case having been known as the case of recreant love. Having heard of the success of the disappearance at River Bridge in '04, another set of thieves broke into the post office by prying up a window, this time using dynamite to blow open the safe. Whatever came out of the safe was relatively small, as the robbers left behind a great deal of valuable postage. Initially, Postmaster O.A. Wolverton declined to make any statement about the loss, pending arrival of the government inspector. It was thought by most that any monetary loss must be small, as no more funds were kept on hand than what was absolutely necessary. Now, you may know this space. The post office was located in the two-story building on the corner of Main and Railroad Streets. Railroad now being known as Warren, this very location where Crush sits today. Later evidence was obtained which led to the conviction of a Mr. John Love. This evidence came courtesy of Gustav Johnson, a mere boy of 17 years, who claimed to have accompanied Love and assisted him on the job. Gustav, having led a troubled life, was serving a term in the state penitentiary for a separate offense and offered his testimony to demonstrate good behavior. The Johnson boy indicated that he was with Love all the day preceding the blowing up of the post office safe and confirmed his own participation in the scheme, stating that the proceeds amounted to $520. After dividing the swag and claiming 1/3 as his stake, they parted and went their separate ways. Now, the exact amount secured by robbers turned out to be $531.45. It seems that perhaps the Johnson boy was shorted a bit. As such, the boy's account was validated and Love sentenced by federal judge C.E. Wolverton. Upon arriving at his decision, Judge Wolverton asked, "Have you anything to say as to why you should not be sentenced?" Love growled, I was convicted on the testimony of a perjured witness." Despite that claim, Judge Wolverton sentenced John Love to 3 years of hard labor at the government penitentiary at McNeil's Island, Washington, and imposed a fine of $10. Love will not appeal. But it was not only the crimes of theft that have occurred within these bounds of this sleepy town, allow me to relate to you the tale of the catless man. In 1915, which was a warm but wet year, a company of 4 men head out to enjoy some fishing upon the Silets River. Upon passing the old Billy Brown place between here and Falls City, on which Edward Ryan now resides, the leader of this little gang, a scurrilous Mr. Fred Smith, wanted some fun. Espying a cat in an open field, Smith drew a bead on the animal and fired, with the result that the Ryan family was therefore immediately catless. Fred Smith of Monmouth was arrested the following Monday and charged with shooting a domestic animal. Smith, seeing that he had no options to contend the matter, pled guilty and was bound over to the grand jury. Now, Mr. Ryan, loving his cat, argued that the cat was valuable due to the copious number of gophers and field rats it dispatched around the premises. Mr. Ryan stated that he would not have exchanged it for the best dog within the confines of Polk County. Let us fast forward a couple of decades to November 19th, 1934, and recount the adventure of the fortuitous Marshal. Verge Shrunk was then Monmouth City Marshal. Upon turning out for duty on this unusually dry and warm November morning, he immediately noticed a suspicious car sitting in the Halliday garage. Shrunk called upstairs to the son of the garage's owner, Glenn Halliday, who then worked as an emergency fireman. After hearing nothing, Shrunk started to leave, but caught Francis Buckford entering the garage. Apparently it was Buckford's car, which was fully loaded with suspicious car parts and supplies. Marshal Shrunk went to question Buckford, but upon being questioned, Mr. Buckford drew a hidden handgun in an attempt to disarm the marshal. Halliday, hearing the commotion, came through the garage door in barely the nick of time, and he was armed with a revolver. The startled Buckford aimed at Halliday, but didn't shoot and instead tried to flee. Shrunk then took bead and shot at Buckford to stop him from escaping. His aim true, Shrunk and Halliday carried Buckford into the city recorder's office, where he died after a short time. When the city recorder, sweet Elsie O'Rourke, came to work the next morning, she was stunned to see blood still speckled across the floor. A coroner's jury later ruled the death a justifiable homicide, and the adventures of the fortuitous marshal were put to rest. Now, as we continue to explore and roam these city streets during this most spooky of seasons, I implore you to remember that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And with that, I'll take my leave, but not before I have the pleasure of introducing Amy Christensen of the Heritage Museum.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and support our neighbor and learn more about Monmouth. This is really great. This year has been a year of a lot of changes for the Heritage Museum. We have a new manager, Carly Annable, who's been very fantastic at helping us make a lot of changes. We're turning over the stories and the artifacts that we have on display. And I myself, Amy Christensen, I am the new assistant at the Heritage Museum. We're also representing our society, which is another arm of our organization, and they're the ones that were providing the hot cider tonight. We just wanted to let you know that this year we are busy rotating our exhibits, And this month, we have a new paranormal exhibit that will open tomorrow. So please come in. We're open Wednesday through Saturday, 1 to 5. And this will be a very temporary exhibit. So make sure you head on over and take a look. And then next Saturday, October 12th, we're going to have a paranormal investigative group come in and give a report of their findings from an investigation they'll do in the museum this upcoming week. And they'll also share more about the tools that they use, the equipment in their industry of hunting the paranormal. So it should be a really fun event. Again, that's October 12th at 1 p.m. at the Heritage Museum. So at this time, I would like to invite to the stage Kylie Halama, who will regale the tales of Rick's Place and Prohibition.
Hi, everybody. I'm looking for my brother. His name's Cecil. He's about yay big. He's wearing a derby hat, an old-time sports coat. He's see-through, a little dead, maybe. I don't know. If you haven't seen him, he's probably back at Rick's Place, that coffee shop right behind you, right behind the trees there. Oh, darn it. My name's Ethel. I'm his sister, and I've been looking for him for over 40 years. And I can't wait to give him a talking to. Cecil, he used to own that building, which is Rick's Coffee. Back then, it was called Mulkey's Grocery Store. It's 106 years old, and he's never been able to let it go. It's over there, 123 Main Street. It's kind of hard to forget that address, right? So, it's a 2-story beauty with more than 2 stories to tell. And some of those stories may be ghost stories. Rick and Mary, they run the place now. And like I said, it is a coffee shop. They've had a lot of visitors over the years. Not all of them have been human. Cecil has been dead for 40 years, and he has always been a troublemaker in life. Well, unfortunately, he's still causing trouble, which is why I'm trying to find him. He's been spooking Rick and Mary for a long time. So, his favorite place to hang out in life was in the alley right next to the building. He and his buddies would hang out, talk, laugh loudly. Well, they're still doing that. And poor Rick pokes his head out into the alley, and he sees nobody. To him, it's an empty alley. To me, a bunch of ruckus-causing afterlife weirdos. And it's not cool. Poor Rick and Mary, they're spooked on a daily basis because of Cecil. He will ring the back bell in the back room. You know, a little brass bell above your door. Rings whenever you open it. Well, Cecil's just over there, ding, 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 trying to spook everybody. And that's not all. He'll play with the motion-sensing paper towel dispensers, wasting an entire roll of paper towels into the bathroom sink. Mary, she's thinking the thing's broken. She had a mechanic come and inspect it. Mechanic's like, I don't know what to tell you, lady. It's fine. It dispenses with motion. So someone was activating that sensor. Well, they were closed. There was no one in there. So I blame Cecil. It's always Cecil. And that is wasteful, buddy. He'll walk around the store, knocking things over, just because he, like a cat, just knocking things over off the shelf. He'll even walk by Mary and untie her apron multiple times. I think he's trying to get fresh with her, and that's inappropriate. Not cool. I know it was him because one day, Rick actually saw him. He came to the counter, and in the blink of an eye, he sees my brother wearing that same old hat and that coat and his stovepipe pants at the counter, as if he was about to order some coffee. Rick blinked, and he was gone. Because it happened so fast, Rick's like, it was probably nothing, and just went about his night. Well, not 2 days later, Mary saw the same figure walking around. And she told Rick. And he dropped his jaw and said, "Oh my gosh, that sounds like the exact same man that I saw 2 days ago." Well, they came to the conclusion that it was the old owner of the building. And that is my brother. I'll find you, Cecil, even if it takes me another 40 years. And they still hear you, brother. I know you're out there. I know you can hear me. They still hear you, your footsteps walking around, you're knocking on walls and knocking things over, you're whispering. It's like a 40-year-long hide and seek, guys. It's driving me crazy. I just want to rest. All right. You know, the upstairs of that building, it's now storage, but it used to be a pool hall. Now, like we just learned, Monmouth has been dry since around 1865, right? And that building's only 106 years old. So they, for some reason, found a legal loophole, and they were able to obtain an OLCC server's permit, a server's license. And they served, brace yourself, beer. Awful stuff. Turns men into pigs, if you ask me. Well, the regulars always caused a ruckus. And they were even seen on a regular basis upstairs, opening the window, pouring the beer onto the people's heads as they were walking on the sidewalk. Well, guess how long that OLCC permit lasted for? 6 months. And they were not able to renew it. We were dry for 147 years. My lovely town of Monmouth is Oregon's oldest dry town. That is until 2002, and these gosh darn millennials, they didn't like that. So they whined about it, and they complained, and they started this legal campaign that was to repeal the Prohibition law. And they won. Apparently it was a problem to go to Independence to get your devil's juice. Now they didn't want to travel the 2.5 miles, and now they get it here. Well, yes, it was successful, but not all of us were happy about it. Maybe it was a coincidence that the first establishment to serve alcohol ended up burning down and going out of business. Vengeance from our founding fathers, maybe? Or from a crazy old ghost sister looking for her brother. I don't know. Anywho, if you see him, if you see Cecil, pay him no mind. You'll just encourage him. I'll find him one day, and I'll take him to Mother, and she'll give him the spanking for spooking the city. Thank you. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Shell Batchelor and Antonia Schollerman with WOU Library and Archives. Thank you.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you. Hi, I'm Shell Batchelor. I'm the new Dean of Library and Academic Innovation at Western Oregon University Library, the Hammersley Library. I'm incredibly excited to be here in Monmouth. I'm a new resident and really enjoying life here. I grew up in Salem, so I'm kind of local. I just wanted to let you all know that the Hammersley Library on campus, it's a beautiful building, and it's completely open to our community. So community members, residents of Monmouth and the surrounding areas are eligible to get a free library card to borrow from our academic library. So of course we have a wonderful public library here, and I'm sure that that meets most of our needs, but if you are looking to do research or look into our historical archives, you are more than welcome to come and visit us. Now, Antonia is going to say a few words about the archives.
My name is Antonia Schollerman. I am a student employee at the WU Archives. I love getting reference questions, so we are open to the public. So if you have any questions about WU, or maybe you have a family member who went to this institution, or you went to this institution and maybe we have pictures, or we have some more information about your relative or whatever, we'd love to get those. We're a free service, but we do rely on donations as many of other institutions. I really just love researching the reference questions.
Thank you.
And now, Counselor Roxanne Belts with one more story for you this evening.
Good evening. I'm Miss Jessica Spalding Todd. Or should I say, I was Miss Jessica Todd. Now, while a lady never discusses her age, I can tell you that I died when I was 75 years old, and I've been dead for another 75. Some of you may have heard of me before. After all, Todd Hall is named for me. You know the lovely building on Oregon Normal School property? Oh, wait, that's right. You call it Western Oregon University. So I've decided to join you this evening to share some of the university history with you, as well as dispel some ghostly rumors, or will I be confirming those rumors? So over the years since my demise in 1944, I've spent quite a bit of time on campus ensuring that my legacy remains intact. You see, I believe that it was my job. No, I believe that it was my duty to instill a strict set of values and morals and behaviors in the young ladies that were left in my charge. So I was certainly strict, but I was also known to have a soft spot for girls who came from broken homes or who could not afford to go to college, but showed such promise. I helped them find a way, just like I found a way. So I expected girls, though, to be worthy representatives of teaching by the time they left the normal school to become teachers and educators. While I and some of my fellow specters spend quite a bit of time on campus, I do have a few favorite spots I like to haunt. To visit. First, I love to visit the hall that bears my name. Todd Hall, which was built as the first dorm on campus in 1912, I took great pride in its appearance and its reputation. I made sure that every girl who lived there knew that she was expected to scrub her floors once a week, and that every morning the entryway was to be cleaned to Todd Hall. And I believe, though, that learning never ends at the classroom, and so I made sure that my girls knew the value of being a proper lady. I instituted regular guest dinners and a family-style Sunday dinner. And I had the young ladies learn about proper table manners, how to serve a meal properly, and that it was rude to look at your cell phone during dinner. Oh, wait, that last one was just a trick to see if you were paying attention. Everybody knows it's rude to look at your cell phone during dinner. Another place on campus I visit frequently is the Painted Alley, which I designed to resemble a Parisian cafe. And while I didn't know it at the time, that's where the girls would try to sneak boys into the dormitory. Nowadays, that's not really necessary, but I do find myself on occasion comforting the spirit of a young lady sobbing over some scurrilous young man. Oh, and those girls can go on about it. That's why some of the living say that they can hear a woman crying in the Painted Alley late at night. Oh, but not to worry. It's just young Janice Powell or Margot Miller crying over some scallywag of a boy who broke their heart. But speaking of boys or men in the dormitory, from the time the dorm was complete, which was actually when I became the Dean of Women and the first director of dormitories, I made sure that my girls' reputations and their virtue was guarded. On more than one occasion, when the young ladies were lingering too long outside, saying goodnight to their dates on the porch, I found it necessary to close and lock the front door at the exact time of curfew. My girls only made that mistake once. But truth be told, my suspicion of those men who visited, and truth be told, I was suspicious of those men who visited and made it a strict policy that if there was a man in the dorm, it was to be announced loudly when he entered, where he was, so that we all knew what he might be up to. That's why when they had those ghost investigators come into my house to see what they could detect, I made sure they came away with a feeling of my strength. I believe one of them said they sensed a sturdy woman with a my way or the highway attitude. Sturdy indeed. Well, after 75 years as a ghost, I have learned all kinds of ways, though, to make the living feel like they're being watched, just to remind them it is my home from top to bottom. I love to make the lights in the highest windows flicker, and I love to swing the swing in the basement back and forth when no one's in it. And sometimes I'll conjure up a horrible chill or rearrange objects overnight, just to set people's hair upright on the backs of their necks. Sometimes I'll appear as a mist in the halls or chat mysteriously with other spirits in the basement. One Christmas Eve many years ago, there was this nice safety officer. I think his name was Keith Carlson, and he was alone that night on Christmas Eve. So I decided to get all of my spectral friends together, and we turned on all the sprinkler valves at once, which set off all the fire alarms. So after he got back and he had turned them all off again, and he went back and he looked at his security cameras, all he could see was that we had been turning the lights on and off slowly for the last 15 minutes. I'll never forget when he said to himself, "Well, that's not normal, but I'm sure as heck not going back there to check it out." So Merry Christmas, Mr. Carlton. So another time more recently, I was disturbed by the building manager, Nancy Ganson. She was working late, and I just felt it was not proper for a woman to be working at 2 a.m. So I had some of my friends sprint up and down the hallway of the third floor right above her. And I didn't mean to scare her so much. I just wanted to remind her she was working too hard and working too late, and she should go home and get some rest. But ever since then, when she does come back, she brings one of her dogs with her. I'm not opposed to dogs, but with all their sniffing and barking and such, they just don't belong in my home. Now, another place that people say they can feel my ghostly presence, or a ghostly presence, is the cottage. But that doesn't surprise me that the living would feel me there. I frequent the cottage because through my budgeting and my frugal efficiencies, we were actually able to build the cottage. That was in 1917. And then it became my office, and it was actually my home until I retired in 1931. And while I've been blamed for many of the mysterious goings-on in the spirit realm here on campus, there are plenty of other ghosts that roam the streets and halls, and some of them are very benevolent, and they just do in the afterlife what they did in their life. For instance, my colleague, Dessa Hofstetter, who was first a student, and then she became the librarian at the Academic Support Program Center. When she was getting on in years, she would walk around the library shushing people, and she'd poke them with her cane when they misbehaved. So now in the afterlife, when she's feeling mischievous, she'll go about poking the living just to startle them, or she'll push books off of shelves. And there are also some spirits, though, here that I'm not personally acquainted with, nor do I hang with them, because they're, how should I say, less than savory characters. So one October some years ago, there were some students who brought in a paranormal researcher to investigate Campbell Hall. The researcher started asking questions like, who are you and why are you here, and so on and so forth, while running an audio recorder to capture the electronic voice phenomenon. Well, as I said, I don't know these ghosts personally, but I can tell you something we spirits dislike, and that is any attempt to contact us if we don't want to be disturbed. In fact, most of the spirits believe that these people making money off of the paranormal are simply tricksters and charlatans out to get your hard-earned cash. Well, when the researchers were asking these questions, the spirits there wanted no part of it. So they started gently pushing the attendees. And when that didn't work, they started pulling people's hair. So I guess they made their point since one girl started crying and ran out. Now, I certainly don't condone this kind of harassment, and I don't agree with some of the other techniques they used to get rid of the visitors, but it worked. So, as a research used a device that displayed words based on electromagnetic activity. That machine spat out the name of one of the girls that was there, then it spat out the word twin, and then the name of that girl's twin sister who wasn't there on the tour. The girl said that was enough evidence for her, even though she was skeptical going in, but she would not be going back into Campbell Hall again. So the last trick that the spirits played on the researchers is during the playback of those recordings, you can plainly hear a loud scream inside an upstairs art classroom, which I imagine gave them quite a fright. However, if you ask me, it was probably just the spirit of an art teacher who'd seen one too many bowls of fruit as a still life drawing. Another apparition who does roam around campus is George Harding. He taught drama at the university until he left the realm of the living in 1965. Since theater was such a strong part of his life, it is no wonder that it's a part of his afterlife. And he used to frequent the old gym at the old Monmouth High School, since the original theater at Campbell Hall was destroyed during that horrible Columbus Day storm. Eventually, though, after the theater moved to Rice Auditorium, George just moved right along with it. Confirming speculation of the specter, Dr. Richard Davis, who's a humanities professor, said once that you would think you had turned off the lights when you were done with rehearsal, and you would start to walk across the room, and the lights would come back on. And then you'd start to go back to turn them off again, and then the theater would go dark. But Dr. Davis was very clear that George's ghost had never ruined a show. He said he knows that George's personality was such that he would have definitely wanted the show to go on. And speaking of the show going on, it would seem to be about time for me to return to the cottage to tickle some children in the daycare center or to make the lights flicker a bit. So the next time you're visiting the normal school, Western Oregon University, please stop by the cottage or Todd Hall. And if you sit very quietly and you think you hear something go bump in the night, there's a ghost of a chance that it's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Belts, Councillor Lopez, and Kylie Halama. I really want to thank you all for coming tonight and being here for our first event. I want to remind you of a couple things. Tomorrow evening, the Independence Ghost Walk, starting at 7 p.m. And this year, if you start at the top of Riverview Park, you'll be able to get a map and choose your own route as you hear about the history and hauntings of our younger sister, Independence. But tonight, before you go, feel free to stop over at the booths, our great partners, and again, another round of applause and thank you for them. Western Oregon University Library and Archives, the Polk County Historical Museum, and the Independence Heritage Museum, and their society partners who have some cider there still for you. So take some of that, and if these stories have inspired you, please don't forget to write your own. Let us know what you remember, what you've heard about our town, so that we can help this event continue to give living history to the beautiful city of Monmouth, Oregon. Thank you guys so much for being here.